you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sakapai, Mr. Gupta, very distinguished members of the audience. It's always a pleasure to speak on anything related to diaspora. A new field, comparatively still a new field of study. Though the word and this concept of diaspora it starts from 6th century BC, when the Jews had to leave the Holy Land, forced migration, and were sent off to Babylon. And since then, for centuries, till I would say 40, 50 years, 30, 40 years ago, the term was essentially with a somewhat negative connotation in the sense that it was used for people who were forced to leave their land and settle in a different place. Last 40, 50 years, the concept has gone through a major change. And term is now widely used for what is the Greek origin of the word, the dispersal from a common source. And that is what the overseas communities have come to be called. Now, freely, and it's an all-encompassing term. We can use it for people who left 20 years ago, and we can use it for the people who may be 6th or 7th generation. But as long as they still have some attributes, they identify with a common source of origin. They share some civilizational, cultural linkage, affiliation, linguistic, food, any of these, and that communities come to be called the diaspora of that country. And that is why one of the very difficult challenges was because in India we were using this term very loosely, NRI, and it is still used, non-resident Indian. Now NRI was a term actually introduced primarily for the taxation purpose, that people who had lived out of India for more than 180 days or 182 days, and they had certain tax concessions. So it was a definition of RBI and the taxation authority. But technically they are people who are still citizens of India living outside. Then there is this other term called PIO, person of Indian origin, which is who's a foreign citizen who traces his origin in India. And that is why we had this term for people, whether they are from Mauritius or Caribbean or Fiji, or technically even a citizen of USA who's originally from India, whose parents or forefathers are from India. So, and the third is the category and about whose human rights are, in fact, few people talk about, unfortunately. And that is the category of stateless citizens. These are the people who have no document, who don't have citizenship of the country where they are settled, and they have no documents to establish that they can claim citizenship of India. There are historical reasons for it. Bulk of our diaspora is a creation of or is a byproduct of colonialism. Prior to colonialism also Indians have traveled since the prehistoric times, or at least since the dawn of history. We have had small Indian communities 2,000 years ago. And that is why, but these were entirely the most extraordinary thing about the Indian diaspora compared to other diasporas is that all, even pre-colonial migration of India was entirely peaceful. It is not a result of any conquest. It was spirit of adventure, it was spirit of or entrepreneurship, primarily these two. And that's why you see such extraordinary impact of India, its culture and civilization in Southeast Asia and in Central Asia, where our people have gone to these two parts even 2,000 years ago. But they completely merged with the local population. And in most cases, the women didn't go with them. They went alone and married local women. So they became completely part of that society and spread the Indian culture, civilization. But those are untraceable in the sense you can't establish their thing except through culture and civilization or language. Incidentally, in fact, for most of Southeast Asia, the reason why it is so powerful is that the art of writing, the script was introduced by Indians in most of Southeast Asia. And that is the reason we see such powerful impact. The larger number went as indentured labor or free passage people to follow the indentured labor in the colonies of the Britain, France, and Holland and Portugal. The four colonial powers with whom India had interaction. And they have settled in every part of the world wherever these colonies existed. Then you have had the knowledge, the free passage people who have gone completely of their own accord, their own passage, their own arrangements at the other end. And these people were not bound by any contractual obligation to serve somebody there for so many years. So they are the people who, and Mahatma Gandhi was one of the free passage people to South Africa. And they have made extraordinary contribution. It's our indentured labor which have turned these countries into what they are: Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Jamaica, and East Africa, South Africa, Mauritius, Reunion Island, and then in this side, Malaysia, Myanmar, Fiji. So our people were the backbone of those economies. And then comes this post-independence or colonial connection, again small communities in UK, Canada, and trickling down from Canada to US. And then this large-scale knowledge diaspora who have gone for higher education to US and have settled down there, particularly after 1965, when the US changed its laws and made the citizenship system very different from what it was prior to 65 for foreigners to acquire the US citizenship, and 1966 the same thing by Canada. So you have a large number of people staying back or migrating to meet the shortages there. So people like doctors, and engineers, multinational workers, they could migrate much more conveniently than earlier. And it resulted in the emergence of this professional class of Indian community. And then you have this somewhat of a forced migration of Indians from East Africa to UK, Canada and US, and some smaller numbers to Australia. Idi Amin, and in the wake of the independence of various East African countries. And that increased the size. And then came the IT, which again gave another push, and a large number of Indians went as H-1B workers to US, particularly from southern Indian states of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and you have a large new diaspora who had gone there. And your last segment is the 73 oil price increase, and suddenly the Gulf countries had huge money at their disposal, and they decided to modernize their countries, build huge infrastructure, industrialize, and they had no human resource. They only had money. So human resource was provided largely by the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and smaller number Nepal, and the earlier the Palestinians who were there. But largely it was the Indian subcontinent which met the human resource need. And that is where you have a very large presence of Indian workers in the Gulf. Today the number would be anything around 5 million or so. And our diaspora policies have also gone through a change accordingly of the government, depending on the situation in India, depending on the kind of government in India, and depending on the circumstances and opportunities abroad. So you have pre-independence, if you see the history, the colonial government, which on one hand facilitated that these indentured labor could go, because you're taking up the question of human rights of diaspora. And our national movement, our independence movement, is became a part of that. The Congress party started passing resolutions pertaining to overseas Indians in 19th century. The founder of the Congress, the British AOU, has written numerous communications to then Governor General on this question, calling it that this is not a good practice, and at least recommending better treatment of the people who have been taken as indentured labor. And so from the time of the founder of the Congress, the issue has had political implications and has been taken up, and that is why every time there was a demand, it resulted in some policy measure. And as early as 1837, the Office of the Protectorate General of Immigrant was created on the basis of protest of malpractices, etc., in the recruitment of indentured labor. Then there is a committee in which one Indian member was also included to go into this entire question. They recommended certain reform and changes. So there, again, the government's policy was do minimum required window dressing. They have to protect the interest of the colonial power to save the plantation economies. But at the same time, the political fallout in India should be manageable, so follow the policy that you are doing something about it for the welfare of Indian workers. When the Congress party got established, it started discussing this issue in every annual Congress session. And very interesting views, if you go through the old papers, have emerged. There was a line of thought in Congress party which said that there should be absolutely no indentured labor going, it is inhuman. There was another, the moderate, who are these Gokhale and others, who say, okay, let them go, but they must be treated fairly and their human rights should be protected. Then there was a line, even then Aga Khan and Sir Dinshaw Petit and these some of the big Parsi businessmen who were acting, that India should even think in terms of acquiring some colonies abroad for its growing population. And this is, imagine, 100 years ago they have talked of this, that India's growing population. And today what our population is. So these three strands were there. It will come as a surprise to my entire audience that the first major brush off an altercation that Jinnah had in the assembly in Bombay was when he stood up in the House and very forcefully argued against the inhuman practice of indenture. And so strong language he used that the governor asked him to withdraw some of his remarks, and which he refused. This was 1909. So we had evolved from there. Gandhi was totally against indenture, having seen firsthand what happens. Congress party would send delegations to these countries where indentured labor was, right up to Caribbean and South Africa, East Africa, Fiji. On Mahatma Gandhi's request, C.F. Andrews went to Fiji. And they all gave reports, Manila and Doctor to Mauritius, and said, no, this practice must stop. This practice was finally stopped. The indenture came to an end in 1917. And 1920 is the last indenture, I think, that has gone from India, but the practice had stopped in 17. The policy of after stoppage of indenture is again an interesting evolution, because Gandhi, all our national leaders, Nehru, everybody have said, we will protect you. Today India is weak, it does not have the wherewithal, the force, the authority, but when India is free, we will protect you, we will safeguard your interests. There are any number of speeches of Nehru addressing Indian community in Singapore, addressing Indian community elsewhere. But once India, and as interim government in 1946, the Department of Overseas Indian Affairs, that department was closed. And we stopped all trade with South Africa, which was at that time 5% of India's international trade. Then comes post-independence, a complete change in our policy. He follows the policy of non-alignment, and then that we would lead the world in the fight against colonialism and apartheid. And for both these, he needed widespread. So the issue of diaspora became secondary, and the Indian communities were then told, no, you must identify with the people, you must become the loyal citizens of the place, and the primacy of locals was in a roundabout way accepted. Now, so much so, in 1955, Seth Govindas, one of the very active members of parliament from Jabalpur, he used to ask questions about the Pravasis or overseas Indians in Lok Sabha. And in response to a question by Seth Govindas, Nehru said on the floor of the House that our interest in diaspora is primarily only cultural and civilization. So it's a very substantial change from what he said addressing the Indians in Singapore to what he said in the floor of the House in 1955. And our policy broadly remained that. Then came extreme shortage of foreign exchange and this large Indian community in Gulf. So the policy became what I have written in my articles, the foreign exchange centric, remittance centric policy. That get the workers to send as much money as possible, or these overseas Indians to send as much money as possible to meet the foreign exchange shortage of India. Next stage is, well, Shastriji hardly lived, but he entered into an agreement, and the why, because you're taking, I must not know, I think I'll finish it. The other thing of significance that happened during this period was a large number of Indians had to leave, mostly from Tamil Nadu, had to leave what was Burma or Myanmar now. And they felt that Indian government did not protect their interests. What Nehru had done was to nationalize various sectors of economy, and he also launched a policy of Burmanization, that everything would be in the Burmese language. Now with these twin things, the Indians lost the advantage, otherwise 51% of Rangoon's population was people of Indian origin at the time of Myanmar's or Rangoon's independence, Burma's independence. Sharat Chand Bose wrote good part of his works of Sharat Chand Bose are written when he was living in Rangoon. But Nehru was in no position to oppose that. We ourselves had abolished the zamindari, we ourselves had gone for land reform, nationalization, and then this overall policy. So we were in no position. And plus, we were weakened after 1962 war with China. Our standing in the world had taken a severe jolt. Next big problem for Indian diaspora comes in East Africa. When the Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania became independent, aggressive nationalism, change in economic policy in the case of Tanzania, to leftist policies, change in, and Idi Amin. The result was expulsion of Indians, a large number of Indians left, and they settled down all over, as I mentioned earlier. And then Rajiv Gandhi comes on the scene. And of course, we would not know, but I mentioned the another diaspora problem we have faced during, and the only time for whatever short period Shastriji was there, this issue of the Tamils in Sri Lanka that had been going on, and he entered into an agreement with Srimao Bandaranaike to settle this question, but all that we all know what has happened since then, and it's all a history now. And then comes this African expulsion, which led to creation of larger communities in UK and US and Canada. And then Rajiv Gandhi started thinking in terms of how do we get some participation of diaspora in India's modernization. So he made some efforts like getting some of these people, the Sam Petroda and a whole lot of these people came, and they were given important positions so that they could contribute. And then, by 90s, the Indian community, but most vocal section being in the US, has become a good size with the induction from Africa also. And they were all first generation. They started asking for this dual citizenship and things. And what has happened is that India then started thinking that this community has now acquired a critical mass. It has become an important factor. And one part which I missed was the emergency in India and the role that the diaspora played during that time. When emergency happened, many Indians went to US and they were supported by the Indian community. And the Indian community organized itself against the emergency that was declared in 75. Now that is the time the government of India felt the need to politically engage the Indian community, because government wanted to put forward its point of view and defend the emergency. And here were people organizing, I think Ramdev Madani was in US, there were others, number of them who had gone. And from then onwards, the Indian missions became conscious of this need to politically engage the Indian community. And in US, the most important place in that sense, the community acquired a certain standing, a certain critical mass. They formed various associations, first to put forward their own interests, safeguard their own interests, like API, the American Association of Physicians from India, etc. And then among them came people who would take up also larger India-related issues with the Congress. And eventually the government realized when this Burton Amendment will come and such anti-India measures will come on the Capitol Hill, and some Indian community would be mobilized, that how to leverage this, and this relationship became closer. And congressmen who had large number of Indians in their constituency started taking keener interest, Solars and people like that, and we realized that this is a strength which we must leverage. And the NDA government, then of course the Khalistan movement, which was very substantially funded from abroad. A large number of gurdwaras abroad became the nerve centers of the support for this movement. So there we had to very actively engage the community, and the implications of diaspora on India's internal security. This was brought into sharp focus. I was India's Consul General in Vancouver, Canada during that 4.5 period, from the day, exactly on the day of Blue Star, I reached there. And 2 days prior to that, to Ottawa for briefing, and on the day of the Blue Star to Vancouver. And 4.5 years I experienced that. And from then onwards, I got permanently hooked to this subject, because I am very sure that while thinking of this Operation Blue Star, its various consequences, at that point we did not take into account in any detail the question, the huge implications it has for our foreign policy, for our national security, global reaction to it, and now the government is so conscious, they are aware that any such decision, the biggest issue because of diaspora is that in today's age of communication and media, anything happens, it has implications worldwide because the news reaches in no time. And the NDA government of Mr. Vajpayee, to whom goes the credit for making this issue completely centrist. They had the BJP, or its earlier avatar, Bharatiya Janata Sangh, always had a far more proactive approach to diaspora or Pravasi Bharatiya than any other party. And there were several reasons. I have written a detailed paper on this subject on NDA government's diaspora policy. And the reason was the policy of cultural nationalism. The concept of cultural nationalism find deep resonance amongst the Pravasi Bharatiya. The other was a large number of preachers. You had Shri Shri last year, large number of the religious preachers, teachers, spiritual gurus who have been going abroad since the early 20th century, where our indentured labor was, and in US and other places. And they also worked, so many people from Arya Samaj, these organizations, and they have also worked against forced conversions. These people have deeply influenced the thinking of the diaspora. And so their thinking finds a resonance in the policy of cultural nationalism, and because of these people, the Bharatiya Janata Sangh as well as NDA, the BJP, have had a different view of diaspora, and leaders like Mr. Vajpayee have very closely interacted, and Mr. Advani, whenever they have gone abroad, when they were in opposition from 50s onwards, they have closely interacted with our diaspora overseas community. So it was only natural that when he became the Prime Minister, they decided that they would take a major initiative, and so these schemes like PIO card and then overseas citizenship of India, and all these schemes could be implemented. And this high-level committee on Indian diaspora under Dr. Arvind Singhvi, of which I was the member secretary. Now, coming to the concluding and coming to the human rights issue. Globalization is a fact of life today. According to the Institute of Migration Studies, it is roughly 210 million people who are working in countries where they were not born, in the global workforce. If there are 210 million people, I mean, if you take second or third generation, the number would be huge. This is not going to stop. Europe faces the demographic problem, Japan faces demographic problem, and from countries like India, where there is a huge population, people will migrate, and these will be articulate knowledge workers who would migrate more in future. So therefore, this interaction will continue and various issues will emerge. At the same time, the different current of nationalism is also on. So whenever there would be an economic stress, the first people who are blamed anywhere are the immigrants. These are the people who have taken away our jobs. So some tension of this kind, whenever economy will be in stress, would also be witnessed. So we would have, and then there is assertive nationalism, sometimes very narrowly thought of, and it leads to problems. Just to put it in the perspective, how serious this issue can be. When this 97 meltdown of Southeast Asian economy happened, people in Indonesia targeted the Chinese establishments. Now these Chinese in Indonesia, many of them are older than our people in Mauritius, which is 1834. Yet, when the major economic difficulty came, because they are amongst the entrepreneurial class well off, their establishments were targeted. So these kind of problems would arise, and it is good. So the world needs both NGOs like yours who will sensitize that these people have done nothing wrong. They are your citizens as much as anybody else. They have brought prosperity to your country, they have brought laurels to your country. It is the Chinese origin Indonesians who have won maximum number of the world championship titles in badminton for Indonesia. Rudy Hartono, Lim Swee King, all these people. So you cannot treat them differently. They have their human rights. Right? We must not be too harsh to the government also when we... No. So, human rights issues will arise. You have mentioned the issue of Mr. Vaita Murthy was here, of the Malaysia has been a major issue in recent years. Myanmar, I would very much want you to follow that. Myanmar is another issue. We have about 500,000 people there who are stateless Indians. And these are not from the well-off section of the society. They are mostly in agriculture sector. These are people from Bihar and this area, because during the British period, an Indian citizen did not require any document to go and work in Myanmar. So they have gone there as agriculture workers or small farmers, and now they have nothing to prove that they are of Indian origin, and they don't have the Myanmar citizenship. So we are working, we are engaged with the government of Myanmar and trying to find an amicable solution. The number is gradually decreasing, which is a good thing. But this is a major issue of Tamils in Sri Lanka, the other issue, and sometimes the extreme nationalism. So it is important to be vigilant. Fiji is another place where tensions keep rising from time to time. And we must be watchful. But because I've been a professional diplomat, I will also say a very aggressive posture on the part of country of origin can be counterproductive. Our goal has to be to counsel them to maintain good relations with the mainstream community, to be contributing to that society where they are settled, and to not have strong ethnic separations. Because military solutions cannot be found through solving human rights. However powerful a country may be, we cannot send Indian Navy to Fiji to go and protect them. In 1965, nearly 1 million people of Chinese origin were killed in Indonesia. And China could not do anything about it in terms of military. So we have to be careful that we are not doing something which escalates problem. Best way is to sensitize also the local, and there are very reasonable people amongst the local communities. Work with them. Work with human rights organizations in that country. So work with human rights organizations in Pakistan on the question of Hindus there. Or generate international pressure. You have today Human Rights Commission in Geneva, you have Human Rights Commission in the country, you have Human Rights Report to be brought out, a session with the country concerned. Last year was the India's turn to have that session. Make use of all these and make use of the social media, which is very powerful tool to sensitize and develop a network of like-minded organizations. The gentle pressure and creating awareness is a very important tool in protecting human rights, not the outright confrontation. Thank you very much for inviting me, and most grateful. Look forward to hearing the learned speakers. I have many friends in the audience. Dr. Chandrasekhar Bhatt has come from Diaspora, many others. So I look forward to that session. Thank you very much.